What is this? Is this the answers to my question?
Would the still photographers please move to the side so we can start the news conference?
You have about as much impact on them as you do in Washington.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, before I take your questions, let me express my appreciation and that of all of my colleagues for the very cordial reception we have received here from the Swedish government. I've had, between last evening and today, about 6 hours with your Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, and I found the talks extremely useful. We didn't come here in order to agree on any particular set of policies, but Sweden, by virtue of its neutral position, has developed views on many global problems, to which we listened with great interest, and we expressed our own views. If it is not totally disastrous for your government, I would like to point out that on many issues we agreed. On some, we maintained differing perspectives, but above all, I wanted to express my gratitude for the very warm reception we have received here, and my appreciation for the scope of the talks and their very constructive nature. Now I'll be glad to take questions. May I suggest that I'll take questions from the Swedish press first, and then I'll take some from the American contingent that's traveling with me. Unless you antagonize me too much, then I'll move to the Americans right away.
From Swedish Broadcasting, Dr. Kissinger, on which issues do you still differ with the Swedish government?
Well, it isn't, we didn't sit down and try to draw up a balance sheet on where we agreed and disagreed. I think it can be said that the Swedish government looks at many problems in the world primarily from the point of view of the domestic evolution of those societies. And from the Swedish point of view, that makes a great deal of sense. We, on the other hand, having certain responsibilities for the global balance of power, in which Sweden does not share, have to look at problems also from the point of view of the world equilibrium and from the foreign policy point of view. So that occasionally produces a difference in perspective. But we didn't sit there and try to draw up a communique on where we agreed and disagreed. I was impressed by the scope of the analysis of your leaders and profited from it, and in some cases presented our own views.
Mr. Kissinger, General Electric is planning to sell 2 nuclear plants to South Africa. Now, I know there is an agreement between the States and South Africa on cooperation in this field of peaceful use of nuclear energy. Now, not only Jimmy Carter is against this, but what is your point of view, especially since South Africa has not signed this non-proliferation treaty? Are you going to have to sign on this treaty before delivery?
Well, this issue has come up so far in the form of a general discussion where there were 3 consortiums involved: a French, a German, and a combination Dutch, Swiss, and American. We are strongly opposed to non-proliferation. We will absolutely insist on safeguards that will guarantee that no reactors that the United States sells can be used for for nuclear weapons technology. And we are at this moment carefully examining the relationship of our any reactor sales to the possible signing by South Africa of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So this is an issue that is now under very careful study in Washington. There hasn't been any absolutely final decision on this. There's been a preliminary one. Yes, sir.
Eric Pierre, Swedish Broadcasting. If you look upon the European scene, where do you see the most likely war risk, and how would you like to minimize these war risks?
I know what you're trying to get me into, but there's an obsession on this trip on the part of European journalists in various countries to get me to say something about the domestic evolution of countries that may have imminent elections. But as I already said in Oslo, I can get involved in the domestic politics of only one country at a time, and I'm fully involved in our own as an issue, not as a politician. If I look at the European scene, I think that in the field of security, great progress is being made in NATO in strengthening the defenses. Great progress is being made in developing a coordinated approach on East-West relations. I believe what is needed now on the part of all of the industrial democracies, those that are in alliance systems and maybe those that are not, is to try to develop some conception of what it is they want to achieve in the fields of development and in the field of East-West trade and economics that permit a more coherent policy. On the whole, I think that the military problems of the West are soluble, and that we know what needs to be done. The political problems of cooperation in the traditional fields, great progress is being made. What we now must concentrate on is to develop some vision of the future, of the kind of world we want to build, and see how we can do it cooperatively, because the individual efforts of any country, not even the largest, even of a country like the United States by itself, cannot do it.
Which legal conflict in Europe do you see as the most
The political the biggest problems that exist today are immediately problems like the Greek-Turkish dispute. And the second problem is that the industrial societies, in fact East and West, but speaking now about Western Europe, how to establish a relationship in which the citizens of industrialized democracies feel part of the political process. This is an issue in many European countries, and this is at the heart of the problems of the so-called participation of various parties in the political process.
Mr. Secretary, are you and your government aware of the fact that the Panamanian people will never accept as legal and binding any canal treaty that is signed by the present dictatorship in Panama, which has been set up and sustained with the highest per capita U.S. aid in the world, or any similar type of dictatorship? That there are plenty of Panamanians and other Latin Americans who would be ready to blow up the Panama Canal if such a treaty is imposed on them. And in view of that, Mr. Secretary, do you believe the United States would accept a peaceful, democratic, and civilized solution to the problem? That is, a free plebiscite in Panama, in which the Panamanian voters can choose the best treaty the United States can offer Panama and the free Panama Canal people.
Well, I think this question proves that man cannot escape his destiny. I've been first of all, may I ask you whom you represent, which
I
newspaper?
represent Latin America here in the Latin American press.
Well, I frankly do not know what by what method the Panamanian people will react to the to any agreement that may or may not be made. At this point, in Africa, I mean, I think that Mr. Palme really should speak for himself. I did not have the sense that there were any major differences in our assessment of the African situation. Sweden has a more prolonged experience in certain parts of Africa than we have, and has contacts in some parts of Africa where we have none. And we didn't agree in our evaluation of the Angola situation, as you know. But if one looks at the present situation, I think our views are complementary rather than in disagreement. I don't want to undermine Mr. Palmer's position here by saying this. That was my impression, but he, since we didn't sit down and try to draw up a balance sheet, I don't want to speak for the Swedish government.
As you know, some of the Scandinavian countries are members in NATO and some are not. Do you think for the future of NATO, do you think for the moment NATO will continue at the same strength, at the same position for, let's say, next coming 5 to 10 years?
Yes, I would expect NATO to continue, and I would expect, in fact, its military capacities to improve. But we are making no efforts to change the orientation of European countries that have chosen not to be members of NATO. Now, can I take 1 or 2 questions from the American contingent here? Or have they been completely cowed by the virulence of the attacks?
There are still large numbers of American war resistors in Sweden. Are you willing to, or will you make a statement on your position on amnesty or some sort of
Well, I think the position on amnesty has been stated by President Ford. It's not within the province of the Department of State. And the position that we have is, that I have, is the position that President Ford has announced on that subject.
Mr. Secretary, to what extent is Sweden's neutrality made possible by the existence of NATO or American nuclear forces?
Well, I believe that the neutrality of a number of countries becomes effective because there is a balance of power being maintained in Europe by NATO, backed by the United States. And I think that would be generally recognized by anybody as studying the problem of defense, that Sweden, with its relatively small population, cannot defend itself and